one of the most interesting would-be politicians to come from the 2010 Tea Party wave was Christine O'Donnell. And I got some news from The Hill that says that Christine O'Donnell may be on her way back into politics. So, there were so many remarkable, hilarious, entertaining little bits from Christine O'Donnell's 2010 run for Joe Biden's Delaware. Oh no, I guess by then it wasn't Joe Biden's Delaware seat. I don't know. From a Senate, she was running for a Senate seat in Delaware in 2010, and I created a little package of some of the highlights of her campaign. So this is Christine O'Donnell, the best of.
Months ago, Ms. O'Donnell told a local paper that she had indeed used campaign donations for personal expenses like rent.
It's obviously politically motivated. I find it awfully suspicious that if there is an investigation that the AP was tipped off, the AP has been tipped off, and I find it very suspicious that the AP was tipped off.
Do you have any evidence to suggest that the vice president made a phone call perhaps and got this FBI investigation started?
Melanie Sloan, the woman from Crew who's leading this charge, is a former Biden staffer who's to the left of most leftists. Former Biden staffer, George Soros funded, former Biden staffer. And Crew is a left-wing, George Soros funded group, trumped up charges. Oh, no, let me set the record straight on this.
But weren't you living in that townhouse, Christine?
My home was vandalized and eggs thrown at my house. I paid the campaign. There's a vendetta.
Right now, I'm curious about whether you support gay marriage.
You're borderline being a little bit rude. I obviously...
Really?
What relevance is that right now? Is there a piece of legislation? I mean, I shouldn't be voting on it.
It's obviously one of the most... agree with Michelle Bachmann that would stall that.
Just ask Michelle Bachmann what she thinks. Ask the candidates who are running for office what they think.
Why are you being so weird about this?
I'm not being weird about this. I'm not being weird. You're being a little rude. Yeah, okay, I'm being pulled away. We turned down another interview for this.
Where are you going? You're leaving?
Not to endure a rude talk show host, but to... Have you read the book? Are we off?
I'm not. I'm still here.
He says he still wants to talk to you.
Well...
It would appear that the interview has just been ended.
I'm not a witch. I'm nothing you've heard. I'm you. I'll go to Washington and do what you do. I'm you.
Took another weird twist when she canceled appearances on 2 network shows. Followed the airing Friday night of another bizarre video clip.
I dabbled into witchcraft. I hung around people who were doing these things.
I was in high school. Who didn't have interesting friends in high school?
Abortion and masturbation.
Christine O'Donnell, who surprised everyone by winning her primary in Delaware last week. Well, there's another surprise now as a video from her past comes back to haunt her.
This 1996 MTV documentary where she equated masturbation to adultery.
The Bible says that lust in your heart is committing adultery. If he already knows what pleases him and he can please himself, then why am I in the picture? I was in high school. There's been no witchcraft since.
Sarah Palin, who endorsed O'Donnell, urged her via Twitter to ignore the, quote, national media seeking your destruction. A former marketing consultant, now working odd jobs, but then the Tea Party Express came to town.
The primary is 1 week from today, and Christine O'Donnell, with the backing of the Tea Party, is taking her second stab at the United States Senate. The Tea Party group that invested heavily in Joe Miller's far-right campaign against Lisa Murkowski and Sharon Engel in Nevada and more. Candidates who would be human interest stories in any normal election year, who this year are beating establishment Republicans in primaries all over the country. Finally, there's what Christine O'Donnell has said about herself, about her past run for the U.S. Senate. Some claims that don't add up. Last Thursday, those claims caught up with her in a disastrous interview with a conservative radio host back in her home state.
When you were speaking at an out-of-state group recently and you told them that you won 2 out of 3 counties in Delaware, what did you mean?
I don't think I ever said I won 2 out of 3 counties, but I...
Well, let's listen to the audio.
I was the 2008 endorsed candidate against Joe Biden, and I won in 2 counties.
I meant tied.
Well, you didn't
they've got it waiting for you to
Yeah, but you didn't. Christine, I'm just saying why you didn't tie him either.
Extreme views that did not even make the national radar then are precisely the kind of views that have gotten other Republican candidates the nomination this election cycle.
There's some questions about the way that she's raising money from her supporters, and some of that is going to pay off that debt. He essentially said that people have been following her home and that there are people looking in the bushes and she needs to have people check that. And a lot of Republicans are pointing to that, saying what's going on. You also had a supporter of O'Donnell's sort of questioning Mike Castle's sexuality.
So obviously, she's quite a force of nature. This is one of the most fascinating but politically inconsequential campaigns of all American history.
But you want a really good laugh? I've never heard of her before.
Seriously?
Seriously.
I
know the other one starts with a B and my brain can't get. Christine, the other crazy Tea Party lady.
Sharon Angle. Michelle Bachmann.
Bachmann. Yeah, I know Bachmann.
But her campaign included, just everything you would want in not a political campaign, but a bizarre reality show. Witchcraft, walking out of interviews, financial irregularities, getting fired, lying about your past.
Witchcraft?
Yeah, making masturbation a political issue. There are so many and I love the ridiculous.
Masturbation a political? See, I gotta look her up now. Because never, made it, I don't know, because I don't watch local news.
But Christine O'Donnell made my 2010.
Oh, I can understand that.
So the reason we're talking about this wonderful political creature that is Christine O'Donnell is that she might be back. The Hill newspaper is reporting that Christine O'Donnell is considering another run for Senate this year. Earlier in the 2010 cycle, many in the GOP thought that the seat in Delaware could be wrested from Democratic hands, but this was dashed once the Tea Party Christine O'Donnell won the primary. As party insiders tell it, weak candidates claimed GOP nominations in 2010 largely because of their ability to marshal Tea Party support. And Christine O'Donnell was one of these candidates who ended up not winning and actually losing by very large margins,
Right.
So the next...
You know what's funny?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
When the Tea Party first came out, they were smart. I liked them. I liked a lot of what they stood for.
What happened in such a short period of time?
Exactly. They went from hey, this is cool, to what the hell is that? Almost instantaneously.
It's like they emerge in early. You start hearing about them in the national scene in early 2009. By summer 2010, they've helped a candidate win a primary that is making masturbation an issue of public policy.
Amazing.
That's bizarre.
Really, there's something weird about them.
There's something really strange.
The Republicans hate them. They went from normal to nuts. To nothing. 0 to nuts. Just like that.
And you know what? This is actually, the next part of this article is actually fascinating because this is rather extreme. Very rarely do you see one wing of a political party actively trying to discredit and help the other wing of their own party lose. But this is what is happening in this midterm election coming up. The article says that more recently, establishment Republicans have pledged to engage heavily in this cycle's primaries to ensure that Tea Party candidates do not succeed in winning the nomination in the 2014 midterms.
If the Tea Party had not gotten so crazy, they could have essentially created a three-party system.
Yeah, and I actually believed that they would have done it.
I think absolutely, because I was all for them in the beginning.
But something happened, and I guess I'm just not really sure what or when.
Yeah, and I don't know what exactly. Just literally overnight, it went nuts.
Tea Partiers believe that there is a favorable national climate for their arguments. Yeah, despite the fact their own party is trying to get rid of them. And it's so interesting because if you look at the statements that Tea Party leaders and activists and organizers and outlets like Tea Party News Network, they're still humming along, making statements
they can hum all they want. You know what? When you are smoking whatever the hell they're smoking, and whatever it is, I want some because they can do, on it what they're doing, yeehaw. But besides that,
Yeah, here's a quote. He says, this is one Tea Partier told the Hill newspaper this. He said, "I think there's a much more positive atmosphere for liberty-minded candidates right now than even in 2010. I disagree. I don't think so. And I think the fact that 1 year plus before your midterm elections, almost like a year before your primaries even, and your own party is trying to discredit you already, that's a bad sign. If the GOP plays their hand too much and cracks down too far, we might see the Tea Party spring back up. Who knows?"
And that's the nice thing, the funny thing is, the GOP is going after them, and the Democrats are just sitting back.
Yeah. Yeah.
All they care about is fighting each other and not taking care of us. It's all about which party is the better party. It's freaking high school. It's high school.
The thing is, cable news, they have a vested interest in not discrediting this system, because think about it. If they basically say, well, guys...
That's their bread and butter.
Yeah, because they need to keep people invested in this horse race,
Oh, we all know.
This article finishes up, it says, O'Donnell faced controversy after details of her past as a witch emerged. In response, she recorded a now infamous ad that was part of our package, in which she reassured voters, "I am not a witch." My favorite political ad ever. I am not a witch.
Well, see, if she'd come out and said, "I am a witch," she might have gained more votes, because witches are more and more popular. I wonder, I'm sure there's stats, but I guarantee you there are very few Muslims. And I guarantee you there are a lot fewer ever since 9/11.
We have one Muslim. We have one Muslim in Congress.
There you go.
Yeah. And it's also, and this is diverging a little bit, but this is a good topic you bring up. It's interesting, places like Finland can have lesbian women in such high-ranked positions, but in our country, we're so far behind them that when a lesbian woman is elected to the post of a mayor in a small town in the middle of nowhere, that is an accomplishment for us. There is such a difference,
Oh, I know. Look, just the fact that we have a half African-American black president. And I'll tell you, that was, to be honest, besides all the politics, that was one of my big fears with him, is that he would be assassinated.
So interesting you bring that up, because for years, I was absolutely convinced during the 2008 election that he would be assassinated. And then up until 2010 or even 2011, I was bracing, because one part of me was saying, you know what, this is kind of inevitable. You know where this is going. He's going to be killed. But he never did. He was never assassinated, and there wasn't even a close attempt, which is, is amazing, because I was convinced that he would be assassinated,
I was too. I was sure that there would be more obvious attempts.
Yeah.
I'm sure there have been.
There have been attempts, but not like serious,
attempts.
like Reagan type, close call things, So back to our topic, Christine O'Donnell, the Tea Party, etc. At this point, for people who are outside of the Tea Party's kind of internal alternate reality universe, for most people, I think a lot of people would say, well, the Tea Party as a political force is pretty much spent.
I like the libertarians. I like the fact that they want to reduce government, but they'll never go anywhere either.
Well, and also the Republicans
they'll block the libertarians and everything.
Well, and non-libertarian Republicans, which is most of the party, like the neoconservatives, they actually, they kind of publicly say they're against government spending, but, they fund pork spending. And even more so, their entire governing strategy is predicated on sending millions and millions of dollars into the defense industry as government spending. So they're not really anti-government spending either. They'll say they are, but they just do it in a different way than Democrats do,
Yeah, exactly.
And libertarians, you can see this, because they, the Republican establishment has already, they have no use for the Tea Party anymore, so they've thrown them away. But you see them, with Ron Paul's candidacy in '08, and even more with his candidacy in 2012, and now Rand Paul, the establishment is trying to get rid of them as well. It is treating them, basically, cordoning them off in the ghetto of the party.
It has gotten so scary. Everyone just attacks each other, and everyone just fights, and it's not a system of working to the betterment of anything anymore. It's a system of fighting. And
what's even weirder is these people, the real story is, on the floor, these people can't agree to a single thing on the Senate floor.
Oh,
but you know what? They're going to dinner parties together. They're friends with each other. They're cordial, but they can't do it for us. And I agree with you that our political system is so dysfunctional for citizens in general. But for the elites, it's not dysfunctional because they have a two very polarized but kind of ideologically similar in many ways parties that don't really go anywhere or get very much done, while the elite continues to benefit from our economic and political structure. So really, it works fairly well if you're, someone from Goldman Sachs. But for most people, it doesn't work well at all. But I think it is dysfunctional, but we can't make the fallacy of thinking that the systems that are here today and seem impenetrable are actually impenetrable, because they're not, And I think that there are many more vulnerabilities than we can see at this point,
Right. And it's scary.
It's extremely scary. Absolutely, it's scary. But
and where else do you go? I mean, I don't go there. I think we are one of the best countries in the world by far. I honestly think we are going to end up becoming a section of states. We're not going to be a United States anymore if things don't wise up. I mean, Texas has already made little threats as to pulling out. I can see a bunch of groups of states saying, well, we have our own natural resources. Why should we pay for other states? Blah, blah, blah. It's,
And just saying deuces and leaving, yeah. I can see that too, and I think it will begin to happen within the next 100 years.
Yeah.
But back to this, so what about Christine O'Donnell specifically in the midterm in 2014? If she could not win in 2010, where the Tea Party and the conservative movement had the biggest impact upon elections, does she stand a chance in 2014?
As much as she sounds, I doubt she stands any chance, but the thing is, they're going to keep trying whatever they're going to try, essentially.
Yeah. And I think if like me and you believe is fairly probable, if by the time we get to that election day, the economy has taken another turn downward and we are in another recession or maybe even a depression, people turn to the extreme candidates in periods of economic decline.
I remember, you're going to laugh, but going with that, when Obama first ran, I know a lot of people who, when we talked about voting, they said, well, I'm voting against every incumbent on the ballot.
Yes, that was very fashionable.
Because everybody was so upset with it.
And Christine O'Donnell manipulated that and benefited from it.
Right.
A lot of people's desire to have people who were outside the mainstream basically gave them people like Christine O'Donnell, who were so far out of the mainstream of politics, they didn't come from politics at all. She had never had any sort of qualifications at all. She was a Christian, not anti-sex, but chastity kind of organizer. She was, an advocate for abstinence. She was fired from her job I have it here. So she came to Delaware in 2003 to work for a printing company and was fired in 2004.
Seriously? You only got to the state in 2003?
And 4 years later, she runs for Senate and wins the nomination.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Start with something a little smaller because you don't even really know the state that well.
And there are other irregularities to, her record. But one of the things that a lot of people said beyond the Tea Party support, 2010 was the period of Sarah Palin's preeminence as a kingmaker, or in this case, a queenmaker. And when Sarah Palin announced that she supported Christine O'Donnell against the more establishment Republican Mike Castle, who never lost an election in his life. He had not lost a single one. when Sarah Palin endorsed Christine O'Donnell, a lot of people think that's what pushed her over the edge to victory. Do you think Sarah Palin will have the same queen-making status and abilities that she had in the past?
Oh, God help us, no. I'm serious. If Palin ever becomes our president, I'll shoot her myself.
Do you think her endorsement carries as much weight as it did in the past?
Of course not.
Why?
God knows why, but they threw her in there to be vice president, and that's when she had the power, the whatever, to give an endorsement, and maybe, a little after that, but now everyone knows she's come and gone, It's like getting an endorsement from me, who cares?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be kind of the tipping point in these elections either. But back to Christine O'Donnell's background, in the package, the soundbite, one of the news stories quoted a 1996 MTV documentary where she represented her organization that she founded in the 90s called The SALT, the Saviors Alliance for Lifting the Truth, which was a Christian organization.
The Saviors, I have problems with. Okay.
Well, it's not designed for you Jews. That's why you wouldn't understand. Okay.
Because we're not saved. We're going to hell.
You have no savior.
Jesus is, and we're going to enjoy his company while you don't.
Yeah, exactly. So you're not allowed to be in the SALT. But anyways, so basically, the Saviors Alliance for Lifting the Truth back in the 90s advocated abstinence, not too unusual, but its definition of abstinence extended to not masturbating. That you also had to be abstinent with yourself.
Okay, enjoy that. I guarantee you nobody does that, even her.
I know, and if we had a visual element to the show, I'm sure you can find out the video clip fairly easily. But there's just a room full of teenagers just nodding in agreement, and it's just bizarre. So that was her background, her experience.
I'll tell you something. If I had a teenage kid, I would absolutely give them a video on masturbation, answer any questions they want, and say, you know what, go right ahead and do this, stage step.
And masturbation is an opportunity for, masturbation, whether you classify it as sex or not, is safe sex, okay? So instead of telling people...
Not going to get any diseases from it.
Yeah, because you're with yourself. But in SALT, the SALT is saying that basically, or was advocating that you're not keeping your chastity or you're not being abstinent, you must be abstinent with yourself too, then you're not giving people much of a choice.
And here's the thing, how are people like this, how are we to judge? We are not the judge. God is the judge. Or whatever you believe in.
Well, the SALT would agree with you, but they would say, well, God says, she even says in the Bible, it says, I don't know what the Bible quote is, but it's like something, adultery, lust in your heart is adultery, it's something. But she says basically...
blah, blah, blah.
She says you can't masturbate without lust, so that's adultery.
Whatever. You know what? For a man, that's not actually true, because it's a biological function.
Well... I don't know. I think you and the SALT disagree, but then again, you don't have a savior. But, so in 2010, obviously, all these outlandish occurrences and video clips and statements and positions surrounding Christine O'Donnell made the establishment back away from her. They already didn't like her because she took out their guy in Delaware. But the National Republican Senatorial Committee did not give her any money, despite being the Republican Party's nominee in Delaware in 2010. Even Mitch McConnell did support her, and they still did not give her any support at all, which is interesting. So, and then she did some strange things, because she's this Sarah Palin type, she's just the type of celebrity candidate and celebrity politician that we've grown used to in the past decade, or maybe even less than a decade. And she's just fascinating to watch. So when she kind of emerged out of nowhere onto the national scene, she started appearing on all these cable programs and these national news media programs. And she made that choice because Sarah Palin recommended that strategy to her, that in some very important cases, she lied. This is an article from Queerty. So Christine O'Donnell claimed that she attended both the Phoenix Institution and Oxford University. However, very rudimentary digging proved that, in fact, she went to neither of these. At Oxford, journalists uncovered that O'Donnell merely attended a class at something called the Phoenix Institute, which rented space from the esteemed school and Claremont Library in California. The Delaware GOP nominee for governor says she held something called the 2002 Abraham Lincoln Graduate Fellowship in Constitutional Government. Not only does she not hold that for the year 2002, she never had one at all. In fact, it's impossible because the Abraham Lincoln Graduate Fellowship in Constitutional Government never existed. She made it up.
Lovely. I mean, if you can't, well, I shouldn't say, I was going to say, hey, you can't lie and expect to get into Congress, but I forgot. Yes, you can.
But, I mean, it's remarkable that she had this many, at least the people we have in government are fairly good at least covering their tracks or muddying the waters. Lie after lie after lie was coming out in her campaign, and she still managed to win the primary.
Who knows what the hell they were looking for, to be quite honest. The whole Jennifer Flowers one was before he was even elected.
Yeah. You know what? I need to take a little detour into Jennifer Flowers, and I'm going to go back quickly because this topic is our main one, and Jennifer Flowers is not the topic of today's show. However, this is bizarre. Last night I was listening to old podcasts from like 2009, and one of them had a little clip of Jennifer Flowers speaking. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. She really has a country accent. Then today at dinner, my mother says, have you heard the latest about the Clintons? And I said, no. Jennifer Flowers has written a book and in an interview revealed that not only is Hillary Clinton bisexual, but the only reason that Bill and Hillary stayed together and Bill did not go with Jennifer Flowers instead is because Chelsea was such a small child.
Say that again? That I believe.
Maybe he told Jennifer Flowers that he would leave Hillary.
Yeah, but they would never, I mean, she only married him to further her political career.
So she lied about her education. Back to Christine O'Donnell. I just wanted to throw that in there. She says that she, in kind of selling herself to the public, she said that she was a woman who prides herself on having a deep understanding of and being an advocate of the Constitution. Obviously, because this is a woman who holds the non-existent Abraham Lincoln Graduate Fellowship in Constitutional Government. Like many of these kind of female politicians who emerged from the Tea Party, she was seen as kind of a sex symbol. And famously, Margaret Cho announced that she wanted a threesome with Michelle Bachmann and Christine O'Donnell. So that's a funny side note. She, this is crazy. I mean, this is unheard of. I've never heard of something like this. She wins the Delaware Republican Party nomination. The chairman of the Delaware Republican Party comes out in an interview and says that a Christine O'Donnell win would be a complete train wreck. I mean, that is his... Usually they just shut up and take it, because even if they don't like it, because it's their party. I mean... That is crazy. And basically it was that so much outside money from the Tea Party Express PAC was flowing into Delaware that allowed her to win. And O'Donnell said that she wanted to restore America, quote unquote. She was a marketing consultant. She opposes abortion rights, and she also opposes the Affordable Care Act and has pledged to work to cut federal spending. She gained the endorsement of the National Rifle Association. As I said before, she came to Delaware in 2003. She was fired in 2004 from the printing company she worked for, and by 2008 she was running for government. But the reason that she was fired is because the company she was working for alleged that she was using its resources to run a side business. And that is the type of person who can bring fiscal responsibility to government.
Of course she can. Come on. She doesn't cheat on her taxes. I mean, she sounds like just a perfect person who can run our entire government single-handedly.
I guess these
millions of dollars. Hire everyone and let her do it all.
Were the Tea Party crowd just willing to accept anybody who just kind of joined the bandwagon in this case, do you think?
I think the Tea Party is so off its wagon that who knows?
Yeah, and you know what? It's interesting you bring out the IRS and the funds because the I think it's the Justice Department after her campaign, after she lost, started investigating her campaign. They were reviewing a complaint alleging misconduct by Christine O'Donnell. The Associated Press reported today that federal authorities have opened a criminal investigation into whether O'Donnell used campaign money for personal expenses. During her campaign, her short period of notoriety, she raised more than $7 million in funds during her run for Senate. So
amazing, isn't it? And and what really happens to? Well, I don't know if I've talked to you about my theory or not on how campaigns should be run.
Yeah, we actually covered it last episode, and I completely agree with you. The European model.
Is that the European model?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, like you get like 6 months, and you get X amount of money from the government. Can't raise any more. That's it.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
But see, the thing is because
Australia that does their entire presidential election in like 6 weeks.
Yeah, or I think it's 6 months, maybe. Well, it's maybe
there's one place that's like literally 6 weeks.
See, and and probably it's different from place to place, but ours, in Europe, and when I look at the electoral systems that are there in those parliamentary democracies or republics, whatever you want to call it. I see something that is an orderly process. I see a process that's not perfect. I'm not saying that. But it is something that ultimately looks like it serves the needs of the government that it supplies people to. Ours has become a cash cow for outside interests and is a train wreck, a clown car that brings us people like Christine O'Donnell and Sarah Palin. I'm not going to lie. People like Christine O'Donnell are extremely entertaining. But is that the type...
And don't get me wrong, you've done all that stuff in Europe, too. I mean, but I think you have less of it.
But, and you know what? But you don't really. I mean, you may have some people that are performative, okay? That are more known for their celebrity status than for, being politicians. But the thing is, our system really rewards that. The European system does not reward that at all.
Yeah.
You can't be elected on the basis of celebrity really in Europe,
And not only that, if you do something like, let's say, marry and bury and smoke crack and blah blah blah,
or the Toronto
you're not
mayor
going to get reelected in Europe. Whereas here you will.
And Canada you will too, with the Toronto mayor who was smoking crack.
Right. But you know what I mean? You commit a crime over there, that's it. You're done.
Yeah. You're not going to be shown the amount of leniency, I guess, because people love, but it's like leniency only in action, because like people will hem and haw till the cows come home about their politicians, but they'll still elect the same people,
Exactly.
They'll look to the same parties because we're demoralized because our quote-unquote democracy doesn't serve us. And I think at some primal level, some subconscious level, people know that. They just don't want to admit it to themselves.
And that's the other thing. It's like everybody in their dirty little secrets. If everyone just stopped judging people for, this and that and the other thing, we could go a lot farther.
Yeah.
But especially with our politics, it's high school.
But Christine O'Donnell wrote a book. It was ghostwritten, but she wrote a book.
It sounds like she can read.
About her experience. And the book was advertised as a tale that would embody O'Donnell's identification with America's frustrations and concerns with the current political climate. It also describes how she got plenty of media attention. Go figure.
I mean, she was never in it for the right reason. She was obviously only in it for money and fame. She was an attention whore.
She said, okay, if evolution still existed, wouldn't we still be seeing monkeys evolving into humans today? Number one, that evolution is a process that changes in imperceptible, very small changes from generation to generation, and it takes place over millions of years. But also that she doesn't really understand that for something to have evolved from something means that the thing that came before doesn't exist anymore.
Whatever.
And the thing is, it's really kind of inaccurate to say that we come from monkeys. We came from, what's the most accurate statement? And again, I am not an expert in this, but from what I understand from my anthropology class, basically, we share a common ancestor with some of the giant apes that live and reside in Africa today. So
yeah, we're like 98 or 99.8% or something.
And it doesn't mean that we evolved from gorillas, and it doesn't mean we evolved from monkeys. What it means is we had a common ancestor at some point, and we bridged off. But Christine O'Donnell believes, and said this in public, that if evolution was true, we would see monkeys becoming humans today before our eyes.
Well, no, what we're seeing is a human becoming a monkey in front of our eyes.
And that's not even the craziest thing related to biology. She dropped quite a few animal-related bizarre quotes. The other one being, and this one I wish I got the soundbite for it, but I didn't. And you can find this quote online too, and I think you should investigate it because it'll give you, if you need a laugh, this is what you need to do is search Christine O'Donnell. But she claimed in one interview that there were researchers, she's against stem cell research, like a lot of right-wing Christian politicians are, but she claimed that in modern-day genetics, there were scientists who were genetically engineering rats with fully functioning human brains. Fully functioning human brains. Like, where do we get her? Oh my, I love it. I love this. But on the other hand, this is what our political system is churning out.
It really sickens me.
And it sickens me that people who, if they really ask themselves, what do they think about Democrats and Republicans? Those people have been conned into and manipulated into thinking that they don't have a choice when they do. And it's partially their fault. It's partially the laziness of people who don't take the duty to take their citizens' duty to research candidates and to go outside of the box and just stay in the comfort zone. But it's also, we have an entire media and political infrastructure that is predicated and is based on the notion of making people resigned to the fact that, I have to choose the lesser of two evils.
Now, I saw a sign once or on Facebook or something that said, senators should wear NASCAR driver uniforms so we could identify their corporate sponsorship.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's exactly true.
Because they don't represent us. They don't represent areas of this country.
Whoever's paying them. Yeah.
They represent donors in our parliament, basically, in our legislative branch. I'm sure you heard that Piers Morgan interview where she just decided to leave. And it was the first interview in Piers Morgan's 25 years of interviewing people.
I mean, you don't do that.
I think it's hilarious. And I think people should be able to...
Unless you're sick, you don't do that.
See, I actually agree with Christine O'Donnell on this point. Because they asked her to come on to talk about her book. And the whole time, because Piers Morgan can be an ass, And he was just badgering her about topics that he knew would reveal that, that would be very unflattering, that she has very unpopular views. And I think...
in that case, that's a different story.
You need to be honest about, these people. I almost felt really sorry for her because it was like entrapment. He says, come promote your book on my show. She comes on. She knows that...
I mean, she should have expected some, but not entirely.
Well, and but the thing is, and she didn't, it's not like she left at first. I think she handled it really well because she said, you know what, I don't want to talk about that. And he pushed more. And she said, you know what, I'm not in government right now. I'm not talking policy. I want to talk about my book, and I think it's a little inappropriate that you're discussing that. And he kept pushing, and so she left. And I think she had every right to leave, And as she said, it seemed like he more had an axe to grind. He wanted to demonstrate that he disagreed with her than he actually wanted to talk about her book. And this is another hilarious headline. So in the 2012 election, in the primary. Surprisingly, I would expect Christine O'Donnell to endorse somebody like Rick Santorum or Herman Cain or Newt Gingrich or Michelle Bachmann, actually. But she did very early on endorse Mitt Romney. And I love it's just a classic headline that came out of it. The headline from Business Insider was O'Donnell casts her spell for Romney.
God. That's why you lost right there.
She casts her spell.
It's all her fault that Mitt lost.
This guy, Mike Castle, had never lost a single election in his entire political career until a anti-masturbation, anti-sex, right-wing Catholic activist who got canned from her job in less than a year and lied about all of her credentials came along and beat him. You know? Fascinating. Ultimately, not very healthy for our political system, but fascinating nonetheless. And I think people should have enthusiasm for people like Christine O'Donnell because she's entertaining. But she should be on a reality show, not at the ballot box, you know? And I think people, Americans, even if you're a Tea Partier and she represents your views, you need to realize that this is the type of person that does not belong in government, okay? Not at all. You can be enthusiastic for her.
She is not in government for any of the right reasons.
I mean, there are so many red flags here. She lied about her education. She created a scholarship that she won. She said she went to schools that she didn't go to. She defrauded her company and was fired in less than a year. I could go on and on. And I think it really will be, when we look back years and years from now, I don't think that the average person will know who Christine O'Donnell is. But the political scientists who are looking back at American politics in the 2000s, but for those political scientists who trawl through the archives, this is going to be one of those classic races that everyone knows about because it is so remarkable in so many ways. The witch part where, she said she used to dabble in witchcraft and then she released an ad that said, "I'm not a witch," and walking off of Piers Morgan, and just everything about her is just loony and entertaining. But I would say she had the right to run for office. But the people of the state of Delaware, the Republicans, should have done their duty and said, you know what, I like this girl, she's pretty, I agree with her, but I have to do my duty for my country and admit that she's not someone who should be in government. And they didn't.
Absolutely.
So.
And that's exactly the point.
And you know what? Christine O'Donnell is playing coy to the press and saying she might come back in 2014. I can't foresee it. But then again, like you said, anything is possible. Especially if
I want to come back and I want to be your campaign manager.
You probably could. You could.
Are you kidding?
It's such a rinky-dink operation. You know what? We might actually have... And you know what? I'm seriously considering, if Christine O'Donnell does run, I would love... See, it's unfortunate because if she does any research, which she's perhaps incapable of doing, she'd see that we're saying some less than flattering things about her. But if the campaign okays it, I would love to just do a documentary and follow that campaign around. I mean, that would be fascinating. But... anything else you want to say about anything that we talked about today?
No, I think we're good.
It just shows you just what a remarkable kind of few months that really was,
I didn't even know about her, and now I want to know more, although I probably didn't.
I mean, but if
I thought Bachman was the craziest of the crazies.
You're wrong, because, Christine O'Donnell is it. And I can give you more names that are even more out there, that found some varying levels of success in 2010. But
and the thing is, I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of, Republicans, Democrats, you name it, candidates. I mean, look at Ross Perot.
Yeah, but I mean...
Not true. I mean, he had the chops, but there was a lot of them that was not.
But would Ross Perot be discussing witchcraft and masturbation?
Yes, you're right. Probably not that.
Usually new trends kind of come very slowly, and they kind of evolve over decades or generations. This could be the harbinger of the future. This could be the kind of media celebrity politician that comes to be the norm in a few decades.
Oh, God help us if that's a trend.
I mean, it's interesting. But Annika Wolf, as always, thank you so much for being on the program today.
I'm glad to be here.
And if they want to...
Even though I get hacked up almost almost half a lung.
And if
But that's actually better than what I have been doing. So there you go.
yeah, well, you sounded fairly good. It was, more, you were understandable. It was just your phone would drop the call and then garbled you. But, I mean, it was fine
And I
pretty
had to
much.
take a couple little inhaler breaks.
So if people want to contact you, where should they direct their message?
Same as usual, Wolfine at yahoo.com.
Okay, and you can contact me, Jakob Music, at Jakob Music Miller on Facebook, JAKOB MUSICK-MILLER, and check out my YouTube page where you are ostensibly listening to this. We're going to try to get up a iTunes RSS feed if we can, because that would help a lot. But please leave YouTube comments, and I would love to start a correspondence with you in any of those ways. So thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you in a few days, okay? Bye-bye. Thank you, Annika.
Oh, no problem.